Hello everyone. To the event on career opportunities for foreign lawyers in the university in the state of Texas. Please let us introduce the panel. So, ma'am, please start with the introduction.
So I'm 𝗵𝘁𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. I have a loud voice. I don't know. No, I need it. Okay. I'm 𝗵𝘁𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. I'm a professor of law at Texas A&M University School of Law. I specialize in intellectual property issues and trade issues. I do a lot of work on India and India-related issues. With that, I'm going to pass it on to.
Good evening, friends. My name is 𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. I'm the dean of Texas A&M University School of Law. I've been the dean, and I've been at the university for a year and a half now. Prior to that, I was a faculty member at another university, Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was a practicing lawyer before that. My area of specialization is, or was, I should say, financial regulation, corporate law, business law, and administrative law. And it's a great honor and pleasure to be with you all and to be back in India again.
I'm Ramanuj, and I'm from 𝗨𝗂𝘂𝗀𝗀. I guess most of you know me. Thank you.
I'm Bithika Anand. I'm a founder of two companies, Legally Consulting and Human Elevation. Legally Consulting helps firms to grow to the next level. So we help them with their systems, processes, relating to their partnership structuring, marketing, branding, business development, IT. I also do mergers and acquisitions of various law firms. And the other organization it is into talent acquisition. So we help place lawyers at various, like whether it's in-house or with law firms.
Okay, thank you. I welcome all of you and thank you for joining us. And we are starting a little late, so apologies are in order for that. But anyway, it's a fireside chat and meant to be informal, and we would love it if you guys raise your hand, ask questions, and the whole point of organizing this interaction is that we can address your questions about something that's quite new. I don't think there's a lot of discussion that happens about how Indians want to can work in the US, or how you can have dual qualifications and how could that be for a career advantage. I remember in a couple of years back, I was still in Goa back then, and I did a webinar, and it was very rudimentary webinar with one of my kind of college time friends who moved to the US and in New York and started practicing there. And we did this webinar that we also put it live. It was at YouTube live, and then it went on YouTube naturally, and I forgot about it. And after 2 years, when I looked, that friend called me and said, have you seen that video? I'm like, no. She's like, it has been watched by 18,000 people. And I'm like, oh, okay. Then I went and checked, and yes, and there are like 50 questions below it. People asking questions about, if I want to practice in the US, if I want US qualification, how does it work? And there's so many questions. And so I think those of you who chose to be in this room right now, I'm sure you have some questions or various kind of interests. See, it was not difficult for us to just send out an invite to our 80,000 subscribers and fill this room. But I wanted to make sure that those who come have a genuine interest in going to the United States and perhaps in an LLM or even dual qualification, working across borders, right? And so it is not just we sitting here, but also everybody in the room has some experience or some interest or some something to contribute to today's session, okay? And you'd love to bring that here and make sure that you are the part of the conversation as much as we are, okay? So thank you again and welcome again. And let's first start with Bobby. Maybe Bobby, you can talk about a little about what brought you guys to India and what interests you about Indian legal industry and what are your observations?
So again, thank you for hosting us, and thank you all for being here. So I actually have some connection to India dating back to from the time I was a young child. When I was young, my grandparents moved to India, to Pune, and lived here for many, many years. And so I've been coming to India since I was about 10 years old. And so it's wonderful again, as I said, to be back. And so against that backdrop, the opportunity to come here with my colleague, Professor Raghavan, and engage the Indian legal community, the practicing bar, judges, students, current students, and prospective students, was really an exciting opportunity. For me, that starts really with the fact that the nature of legal practice, and I was saying this to a couple of you a moment ago, the nature of legal practice is very different today. The practice in which many of you are or are going, even compared to when I went into practice 20 years ago, 25 years ago, is very different and is radically different from 30 or 40 years ago. And I think that trend will continue. And that trend is that legal practice is increasingly becoming globalized. Just as it would be silly in some ways to talk about these are Indian business people and these are American business people and these are German business people. Why? Because the German businessman may be doing more business in India than they are in Germany, and the Indian business person may do most of their work and even live in the United States, and so on and so forth. Legal practice will always have some grounding to jurisdictions, given that law, a large chunk of law, will be municipal in nature, is municipal in nature. That said, there will be huge areas of practice. In fact, that already is true today, but more and more, where an understanding, a sense of the world is vitally important. And some of that understanding is as simple as understanding the world in the sense of you've experienced it. You have been in the world, you have lived overseas, you have engaged other people who are different than you in some meaningful way. And some of it is the substance of it. Understanding, having a grounding in the law of another jurisdiction is obviously helpful in terms of your engagement with lawyers in that jurisdiction and the law of that jurisdiction. But I would say, even broader than that, it is relevant to your engagement with jurisdictions, foreign jurisdictions, and foreign legal systems more generally. So the fact that I have studied Russian law, actually is true, was my area of expertise was Russian law. So the fact that I understand Russian law has made me more capable of understanding Indian law and understanding Chinese law. And not because I've studied those formally, but because I have a frame of reference that is different from the domestic framework in which I've been educated. So above and beyond everything else, I would say my interest in being here, the reason we have come here, the reason we are interested in making sure our law school is engaged with the world, that our student body includes students not just from the United States, but from India and the rest of the world, is because that's where the world is going in terms of legal practice.
Bobby, can you also tell us a bit about about the university, about Texas A&M
Sure.
University, and
Sure.
I was quite excited to know that it's the biggest university in the US in terms of enrollment.
Yeah.
And if you can tell us a little more about that.
Sure. So let me speak to this is the university more broadly, but then a little bit of the law school as well. So as was mentioned, Texas A&M University is the largest university in the United States. Altogether, the system has 125,000 students, so it's a very large university. Traditionally, its strengths were in engineering, in computer science, and in agriculture. And so over time, they have been building on that. So now we have a very strong business school, and we have a very strong health sciences program, and we have a very strong now, as of 6 years ago, a very strong law school as well. But in all of those expansions, the origins of the university have been relevant to thinking about them. So we have a top 10 program, for example, in intellectual property. Again, Professor Raghavan is one of the 7 faculty we have in that area. I mentioned to a couple of you earlier, only two law schools in the U.S. have more IPR faculty, intellectual property rights faculty. One is Stanford and the other is Michigan. Other than them, we have the largest group, 7 full-time faculty who work in the area of intellectual property, technology, and innovation. And the reason for that is because we want to capitalize on the reputation and strength of the broader university. So in picking these areas, that's been a focus. Same in other areas of strength of the law school. So arbitration is a big area of strength for us. Energy law, environmental law is a big area of strength for us. Cybersecurity and privacy. And I can go on. There's a handful of these. I'm glad to share more. So that's the broader university and how the law school fits within it. The law school itself, I tell folks there's a few different things that to me stand out about why it is that this is a great place to be a student, and I'll say a great place, I think, for me to be the dean, I hope, most days. Professor Raghavan would be a great place to be a professor. The first one I say is our location. And again, we were talking about this yesterday. Texas is the fastest growing state in the United States, not just in terms of population, but in terms of economic development. So corporate headquarters from all over the United States and really all over the world are moving to Texas. Among the companies that you'll know, because they're Indian companies that have made their U.S. headquarters in Texas, is Wipro, Mahindra, Infosys, and a number of others as well. Cognizant, that have had moved their headquarters to Texas, in part because of this incredible growth. I can say others too, Toyota, Charles Schwab, and so on and so forth. So lots of companies sort of are coming to Texas, and what that means is for law students and for lawyers, there's tremendous opportunity there to learn and also then to get experience in internships, in externships, and perhaps in employment opportunities as well. So first, the location, I would say, is one thing about the law school that's quite special. There is really no state like Texas in that regard. Second, I would sort of cite is what I think of as the momentum of the law school. So I tell folks that the law school is #1 in the United States, #1 law school in the United States on every measure of a good law school in terms of the delta or the change in its position. So over the last 5-6 years, we have had the largest increase in ranking of any law school in the United States. We've gone up by 100 points in the rankings. We have the largest increase of any law school in the United States in terms of quality of students. So if we look at the quality of incoming students, ours have improved more than any other law school. If we look at our reputation among judges and lawyers, it's increased more at A&M than any other law school. In fact, it has increased double the amount of the runner-up. So the second biggest increase in terms of reputation among judges and lawyers only improved their reputation by half as much as Texas A&M Law School did. So we really are sort of, as a matter of momentum, a great place to sort of look at as a place to study. Now, at some level, you might say, who cares? Like, it's not really on the spectrum of things. Why does that matter? It really does make a difference in terms of the experience you have while there and the experience that happens afterwards. So being part of an institution that is growing, that is fast-moving, that is building, is kind of an exciting experience and a different experience than being part of a place that has been here for 100 years and plans to remain there for the next 100. The last thing that I would say in terms of what's special about the law school, or what excites me about the law school, is what I think of as the community. And two aspects of that. The first is it's a great community internally. It's a good, the faculty, the staff, the students, I think are a great community. And particularly, I would say, a very international community. We are growing the international student population, but our faculty is probably maybe the most. If you look at percentage of the faculty, the percentage of our faculty that are international is tremendous. I mean, my guess is, again, double the next closest in terms of law schools. We have faculty from India, of course, from China, from Singapore, from Spain, from Mexico, from Germany, the list goes on and on. So really an incredibly international faculty. So our internal dynamic, I think, is both a good one to be in as a student, and particularly as an international student, and a very international one. But the other aspect of community that I would mention is Texas A&M University is famous, really, in the United States and the world for the strength of its graduate community. It is regularly, graduates of Texas A&M wear a specific ring called an Aggie ring that they wear. And you hear stories all over the world, and I literally mean all over the world. In fact, I did hear a story recently that someone was in Mumbai, and they were in a restaurant, and they were eating their dinner. And of course, they weren't holding their ring up in the air. They were just eating their dinner. And someone walked across the restaurant from another table and said, "Howdy," which is what we say at A&M, the way you say howdy. Then he said, "Howdy." And it turns out they were a graduate of A&M, and they'd seen their ring across the restaurant and came over to greet them and said, "Let's get together," and whatever. So it's a very sort of strong alumni community and network. And what that means is, as a graduate of a school, you get the benefit of this tremendous resource of these strongly supportive fellow graduates who want to be part of helping you succeed.
So the biggest alumni community in
more than 500,000. 500. I think we're now 506,000. Yeah, 506,000. The alumni now of the university around the world, U.S. and around the world, really. So it's.
Okay, so I have one more question I'm really tempted to ask. You have been here for 3 days.
Yes.
So and you met a lot of lawyers. I think you're having I guess 10, 12 meetings a day.
Intensive. It's we call it immersion. Immersion therapy, we call it.
With lawyers and legal
It's not on. Maybe hold it. Do this one for now.
Okay, so I guess you have met a lot of lawyers and legal academics, judges. So, what's your observation on the difference between how do you find how different or similar, or what's your experience and impression?
I will say, and again, we talk about an expression we have in the United States is we talk about rose-colored glasses. Rose-colored glasses, you understand? So the idea is glasses that have some color, so you see through those. And this is a little bit of a way to say that if you have an idea in your head, you see what you expect to see. So I will say not crazy different. I mean, of course, I'll say in a minute some differences. But my biggest observation would be if I think, and I've taught classes in India in the past in law schools. And I would say if I closed my eyes and I turned around, or I closed my eyes, I wouldn't know from the questions, from the discussion, from the dialogue that I was teaching a group of students in India rather than the United States. In many ways, young people are young people. The lawyers are lawyers. And again, and given what I said earlier about the global nature of practice, I think the differences are far fewer than they used to be. What are some differences? I do think there's a I want to say a professionalism, but I want to be careful what I mean by that. There is a quality of professional thinking in the sense of, this is what I'm doing now, this is why I'm doing this is what I want to do next, and this is what I want to do eventually, that I think is stronger here than it is in the United States. Average law student I talk to in India says, this is why I went to law school. This is what I'm studying. This is what I think I want to do after I graduate, or this is my plan. Yeah, I guess the average law student, you tell me if you disagree. Average law student in the United States, you go, I thought about different things, but I wasn't good at math, so engineering didn't make sense. So I thought, law school. Let me go to law school and see how that goes. Kind of thing. So there's a little more of that, I would say. So maybe that's one difference. I think for legal practice. Legal practice in the United States over the last 10 years has been, there's been a lot of sort of, not changes, but a lot of pressures on it. So I think maybe a little more dialogue in the US than I've heard in the last few days, or I've even had a sense of, than in India around how legal practice is going to look different in 5 or 10 years than it is now. Some of that may be it's happening at a different pace in the US, but I'm not sure. I mean, legal practice may look very different, and you will be able to speak to this better than I. Legal practice may look very different in India in 10 years' time as well, but the discussion may not have gotten as far along in India at this point as it is. So that's maybe the one other observation.
Great. Thank you. So I would invite Srividya to, tell us, quite a few people in this room are here because they want to know how to go from India to US and be an academic there in legal academia, how it is, and what took you there, what has been your journey, and if you can share something about that, working in the legal academia in the US.
Okay. So legal academia in the US was not my ambition when I started. In fact, I want to say when Ramanuj asked, right, why are you both here, right? So Bobby is here, and Bobby is a great dean, but of the many sins, he has several things that's wonderful, but the one sin that I would say is that he did not go to National Law School, right? He just went to the Yale Law School, right? So I am here to balance that. I went to the National Law School and, of course, enjoyed 5 years of my law school, and I decided at the end of it that I wanted to either practice or live in India or, practice in the Bangalore. Karnataka High Court was really my objective, right? But I do want to say that my passion for the area of law that I work for now, or work in now rather, intellectual property, developed during that time. Right, so when I was a student, that's when the Dunkel draft had come through, and there was a lot of discussion about the Dunkel draft, the WTO, and the TRIPS agreement at that time. So as young lawyers, that's one of the things that I would always suggest, right? If you have an interest in one area, develop a passion in it. Stay the course, see how it goes, right? So my roommate also was very passionate about this law, and today she practices in the Supreme Court. They have a law firm here. This is the roommate from the hostel, right? Anuradha writes regularly in the newspaper. She also does trade law and intellectual property law. So, there is something to say about developing a passion, in one area and staying the course in that particular area once you know that that's what you want to do, right? I finished law school. In fact, my first job was with 𝗕𝗿𝗵𝗵𝗀𝗻, the liquor company. So, and I was looking forward to going there, and I also applied to several LLM programs because one of my friends was doing that, and those days, right? I mean, your friend is doing, so I ended up doing it because I wanted to know more about certain areas. That time it used to be international business and intellectual property. And then I did my master's because I got into a good program and I decided I'll do my master's. I did come back to India because you asked about academia, right? I want to say I did come back to India. I worked with J. Sagar Associates, one of the top firms in New Delhi today. Even then, Mr. Sagar continues to be, continues to top the charts in IP issues and several other issues, right? And then worked with Wipro and Titan and enjoyed all of that. In fact, I had a relatively short stint with WorldTel. I don't know how many of you know of Mark Mascarenhas, right? He knows, right? The agent the very first agent for Sachin Tendulkar, who took him out from being a cricketer into a demigod in India, right? So it was all Mark's complete conception. So today I do trademarks law, and I know one of the best branding that we have ever done was Sachin Tendulkar, right? So, and one of the best way we sold the brand, we sold IPL, we sold all of that at that time, and so I feel indebted to Mark for that. So the reason I say that is you can enjoy working in any area in any country, right? And that's one thing I want to, there is nothing fancy about just working in the United States, right? And the United States is another country like India. It has its own problems at different levels though, right? I kind of stumbled into legal academia. I was taking a short break, and at that time, National Law School had a grant to establish an IP program, and I was called as an alumni to establish that, and I thought, well, I'll go ahead, I'll establish the center, and I'll walk out, right? In fact, I still remember the day I started as a professor, one of the zeros from my salary went out, right? So they just took the last zero out of my salary, and I was distraught, and I was also made the hostel warden, right? As someone who had broken many, many rules, I thought I was morally unfit to be the hostel warden, right? So, and then I stayed for 3 months, and I must say that I completely enjoyed the interaction with students, right? I enjoyed, the new ideas. I enjoyed teaching, and that's precisely how I stumbled into legal academia. I went to the U.S. For 3 months because I was a visiting scholar. That was part of what I was doing at that time. So I became a visiting scholar in University of Washington at Seattle, I met my PhD supervisor at a conference, Martin Edelman, and it was, we ended up being panelists in that conference, and I decided to do my SJD, right? And to this day, when I see Marty, and I'm not joking, if you ever see Marty will always ask me, so when are you going back to India? Because that was I promised Marty that I would finish my SJD and go back to India, right? So the day I got my green card or whatever, about a week later, Marty heard about it from somebody and left a message. I'm still waiting for you to pack your bags. You're never going back, right? So, and it's always something that I aspire for. I know a lot of you aspire to work in the US, right? I've always aspired to come back, and Bobby knows this, right? And that's because every institution, every country has its own challenges, and it's your passion to get involved in a challenge, right? So I want to take the jurisdiction out of the plate. That's what I'm trying to do here, right? It doesn't matter where you are. You can be well known, well established, right? And you can do well and be globally known, whichever area, right, you're in and whichever jurisdiction you're in. And the best example that I want to give is 𝗵𝗵𝗵 𝗵𝗂. And the reason I give that is because as I walked through the hall, I actually ended up meeting some folks who had applied for the 𝗵𝗵𝗵 fellowship. Right? He's a fantastic example of someone who went to the National Law School, went to Oxford, came back, started something that seemed really offbeat, 𝗙icy IP, and became. You can go to any country. You can go to Canada. He has a great friend. You can go to Spain. He has a great friend. Right? So jurisdiction is always out of the plate. Right? So as someone who's all of you, someone who's aspiring to do, your masters, you should look at where you have your passion and pursue that area, right? It'll automatically land you in that jurisdiction, in a job that you will enjoy and you will want to continue in, right? So and I do want to say, how did I end up? I ended up because I was in University of Washington at Seattle. I presented at a conference, and I ended up being a panelist with part of a panel with 3 people. One of them remains my mentor even today. The second one was my PhD supervisor. The third one, Jim Chen, mentored me as long as he would criticize some of the things that I wrote about, some of the things that I said, and in turn I would criticize what he did and what he wrote, and we ended up having a great friendship over the years. And at some point, my mentor, Jay, basically said, when are you starting your SJD? Why don't you write a paper? And I wrote a paper, and I don't want to say that it immediately got published well. I think I got at least about 100 critical comments. Right? But I took every one of them seriously, and there was a particular point when he said, "Shri, you should try to publish it here." And I thought it was the biggest joke I've ever heard. Right? I said, "Why would I publish it here? I'm going to publish it in, I don't know, National Law School Law Review or something like that." Right? And those days there were hardly like 2 or 3 law reviews. And I did manage to publish it in the US, and that became the framework for what I did later. Right? But again, I want to say that again goes back to what I say, right? Which is follow your path. It's not the jurisdiction, right? And it was in that framework that I finally applied for a job, and and to be honest, and most of you, I don't even know if you'd believe it or not, but I applied to teach in the US just because I found it interesting, because the process to become a law professor in the US is a very interesting process, very unlike in India, right? It's really a meat market, right? So, I really want to describe it as how all the applicants and all the, the other, the recruiters come in. And so I wanted to just go through the process, right? And, and I ended up, getting a job in the US. I've come back to the National Law School to teach several times. I was closely involved with the NALSAR diploma program. I continue to be closely involved with legal academia in India, right? And the only thing that's carried me forward is not, is not that I'm a US academic. It's because that I have passion in the area in which, I'm working in. So as for all of the students who are aspiring to do LLM, that's the only thing. I mean, where do you want to go? Where do you want to work? All of that will depend on how much you're willing to focus and create that passion for one area of law and stick to it. Right? So that's the long answer for a short question.
So let me ask 𝗵𝘁𝗂𝗏 one question. So, the reason I wanted to invite you today, because on one hand, we always talk, whenever we talk about academia, we completely kind of separate it from the industry. And while I could not call many different people from different areas of law practice, I thought I'll at least have you, because you give all of them advice on how to grow their practices. And there is definitely, as we are also talking, there is a skill gap, and there's a sense that LLM is an academic exercise most of the time. So I have many questions for you. One thing that I wanted to ask in the beginning was that how do you feel that currently LLM is treated by the Indian law firms or the recruitment market? And our sense is that perhaps it doesn't value it that much, but why is that, and what could change? And how definitely I believe that they value foreign LLMs more than Indian LLMs. So if you can explain this part a little.
Yeah. So as far as, because we are recruiting for various law firms, and yeah, so we are recruiting, but in my experience is that definitely when even I was in Amarchand and otherwise also, when somebody comes with an LLM degree and there was a comparison of somebody coming from your national law schools, so the preference was to take a person who's done just an LLB from national law school than a person who's done law from somewhere else but done an LLM, sorry. So and no special weightages so far in my experience is given to people who come with an LLM. So there are no special credits, or the whole criteria for recruitment is fine, you have an LLM, it's okay, but we want to still see where have you done your LLB from. So all the good firms in India give more importance to where you have done your LLB from. But on the other hand, my personal opinion is definitely LLM has to be given has to be given more credit, because people have better analytical skills, their drafting skills, so they are definitely, their learning is much more in LLM. But somehow in India so far I have seen that not that much, but this trend I think is changing now a bit, because it also depends on what are the LLM programs. I think they need to get definitely more specialized. Like for example, if you're doing IP, for example, it's patents or it's trademark, even under trademark, under patents, under competition, what is the specialization? So it is just beyond specialization also. So obviously then the firms who are practicing in a very specialized areas would prefer those students then, because still there are many law firms who still have very generalistic practices in India, very generalistic, though they're moving towards specialization and they're moving away from just being full service firm into a niche firm, into a boutique firm. In fact, we are recommending that, because it doesn't really work that you have to be a full service firm and you don't know all the areas. And they just see, most of them are either corporate firm or a litigation firm. They will do more corporate, less litigation, but call themselves full service firm. But that's not correct, because when people come to you, they should come to you for your specialization. So we are encouraging, and as the laws are evolving in India, specialization is the future.
Can I just say something here, Raman? Oh, you want to say something?
I'll say quick that I will say in the United States, we're also seeing the reaction to what you're describing, in that as of probably even 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, I would say 99% of LLM, maybe 95% of LLMs in the US were general. It was a general LLM, or they would say US law or some nonsense like this. And all of the growth in LLMs in the last 5-10 years has been in certain select fields, whether it's arbitration or intellectual property or something else that has been the trend. So in some sense, that may be indicative of the phenomena that you're observing.
So as someone who went to law school here, right, all law schools in India, right, I believe prepare their students for strong grounding in law, right? Take contracts law or tort law or any of those basic areas of law, constitutional law, or whichever area of law. The law schools in India provide a fantastically strong, I mean a very strong grounding, right, for the students here. When you do a master's program, it allows you to go just a little bit more. For example, you know, when you do intellectual property law in India, you tend to talk about patents, trademarks, right, and all of those particular areas, and you talk about what's the requirement, what it does, and so on and so forth, right? But when you do an LLM, you're able to drink just a little bit more deeply into that subject. You're able to dive a little bit more deeply into that subject, right? So you'll not only talk about trademarks, you'll also talk about trade dress and cyber squatting and, different kinds of things like that, right? So small things that you won't have the time and effort to cover in your basic, your BA LLB class. That's what you will, you will learn more when you do an LLM, right? And that helps when you go for an interview, right? So, and so I agree.
I just wanted to add to what you're saying is, see, if you don't have you've not done your LLB from a very, very great college or a university, then LLM definitely is a very big value add.
It absolutely is.
Especially if it's from foreign.
Right, it absolutely is. In fact, I had met a student very recently from a relatively, smaller college in India and went to Duke to do an LLM, right? And is practicing now in North Carolina in a very good law firm, right? And so when I asked, so how was the experience? She said, well, I knew all the basics, but my LLM helped me specialize in this particular area. So once you get that specialization, you can show off your skills a little bit more when you go for practice, right? So a national law school student who can say, I know trademarks law, will be different from a student with an LLM who can say, well, I have some issues with trade dress and the way in which it's applied in India, right? So that makes a lot of difference, and it gives you that opportunity to, to impress when you go for an interview.
Yeah, and one more thing, masters after you do your LLB from wherever, if you do your masters in Harvard, Oxford, or other good, maybe not just Harvard, Oxford, there are so many other universities all over the world there. And so your whole profile really improves. Then you are a preferred person in any good law firm or anywhere you want to do, whatever you want to pursue.
So I want to add to that as well, right? I say this in my classroom, right?
Please go.
Okay. You're fine. All right. So I say this in the classroom, right? Which is like A graders, right, end up being professors. B graders end up being judges. It's the C graders who will make money, right? The same thing applies. You go to Harvard and Yale, you'll become a professor. Bobby is a great example. I went to National Law School and we became, professors finally, right? You go to a good, solid law school, because I do mean it, right? Harvard and Yale essentially train people for academics, right? But you want to practice, you want to keep that option open. Any one of the top 100 law schools, right, with a strong grounding in the area in which you seek to specialize, right? That will provide you the strength and the required intellectual acumen, right? Sorry, go on.
I have a question, like if I may, this is just very connected to this. I'll take your question right after that, okay? So I wanted to ask actually to all the panelists on this that, do you think that it is possible to teach academicians who are going to teach eventually or research in law and people who want to practice, do you feel that there could be different kind of LLM course designs for them? Or do you think it is possible to actually deliver both the outcomes in one single course? So starting from perhaps, Bobby, please.
So I would say two things. There are an academician in literature or in philosophy looks different than an academician in law or in business, in the sense that the relative importance of a grounding in experience and in the practice of that field is that much more important. I don't want to overstate that. It's not that unless a law professor has practiced law and gotten experience, they're not going to be a good. I had good professors who didn't practice one day in their life, but I do think again the closer to the mark or better is the law professor who has been sort of out there and gotten experience. So why is that relevant to your question? From my vantage, I would say that even the person who is going to go become an academic at some level needs the same educational framework as the person who's going to go into practice. So I would be, if I had a student come to me and say, I want to be a law professor, and so what should my curriculum look like? I would say, just like the one who wants to become a judge and wants to become a lawyer. Now, that doesn't mean that their job is the same. Of course, the job is different later, but there's skills that sort of you will pick up along the way. So I would say that, again, if someone told me for a JD program or an LLB program or an LLM program or even even SJD program, but SJD program becomes slightly more, this is a doctoral program. But for all of those, I would say that they should look, ought to look, and do tend to look largely the same.
Yeah, I think that LLM course has to be the same for everybody. That is your master's, and this is your basic skill sets, and basic education, technical skills we talk about. But if you want to practice, there are many other courses that teach you how to practice, how to develop your practice, how to grow your practice. So that's a special, which comes little later probably. But as far as master's is concerned or your graduation is concerned, there's like in maths, or in your normal English, you do ABCD, like you can't, and you have to grow in that direction, like whether you're doing English or any other course. I think it's important that you do your, your basics, a master's in whatever academics or whatever. It's basically skills. Then it becomes in your subconscious. So when you're practicing law, they all come out when you are even practicing law. But because the basics have to be there. That's what I feel, both for your, whether you want to be a professor or
Okay. So in our experience, we have seen a lot of LLM programs. There are exceptions, but many of them are extremely academic in nature in terms of that you are only going into academic discussions and less about practice. So that is one reason even law firms disregard that education in many cases. So from that perspective, see, if I wish there was a situation where, that people were, it's rather the other side, that there's a lot of academic discussions in LLM, or there's a very academic approach to doing doctrinal analysis, or maybe focusing too much in an academic area. So this is happening already.
Then in that case, you should have masters for learning how to practice. You can have a master's course into that. Let's not confuse it with LLM. See, I think you can have LLM and you can have another master's course to learn how to do practices or whatever. Like you said, with law firms, when you enter, they are not giving any importance to LLM, and you're right. You're right in that case. They are not giving that much importance as I think they should give. They are not giving. But I think then there should be some other design courses which gives you some sort of a master's in doing, in how to do practice, how to do legal practice.
With that background, can you share something about how you do it in your university?
Yeah, what the setup is. So I would say again, my advice to anyone going into an LLM program, whether it was at my law school at Texas A&M or at another law school, would be to be thoughtful about what is the coursework that you're going to choose. Now, worth emphasizing, at Texas A&M and at other law schools that are in states where you are eligible to sit for the U.S. bar exam, if you complete an LLM program, usually a lot of your coursework tends to get dictated. They require you to take the following courses in constitutional law and civil procedure and professional responsibility and evidence and other things. And that's true in Texas as well. So Texas is one of the states where someone who has earned an LLM can sit for the bar, but they have to have, their LLM program must have included certain coursework. So now, why is that relevant? From my vantage, it's important for any international student coming to do an LLM in the United States, at least, to figure out how important is it to sit for the bar exam. And I neither want to suggest it's not important nor the other extreme. You must do it, kind of where it's essential. But there are increasingly lots of, and again, in some ways, this is what Professor Raghavan was pointing out. There are many, many students who come to the United States now to earn an LLM who know that the best professional opportunities for them are back home, right? So it's not, they're not coming to the United States to earn an LLM to escape from, right? They are gaining something by way of training, knowledge, specialized information, which will make them more effective back home, wherever, whether it's India or China or Korea or another country, somewhere else. So if that's the model, then there's a reasonable question about whether the bar exam is a thing to do. Now, doesn't mean, again, don't do it, but given that it dictates what your curriculum looks like, a large part of your curriculum, it's worth being thoughtful about that. So that's one thing I would say in response. The second thing I would say is, to the extent to which you do have the flexibility in terms of your curriculum, any good LLM, well, I shouldn't say that, that you will find if you look at US LLM programs, that there are those that are fairly lockstep in terms of these are the courses you take. Oftentimes that is the case because their LLM students predominantly are taking classes with other LLM students. I understand why schools do that. There's certain efficiencies in this kind of thing. In general, I think it's a terrible model. And I think it's a terrible model because, remember where I started, the initial question of why I am interested, why I'm excited, why we're here, is because I think the practice of law is becoming more global. Okay, but the whole point of that then is that we want to create a academic environment in which international students are engaging with US students, and US students are engaging with international, and international students from multiple jurisdictions are engaging one another in common classes. That doesn't mean there's not some coursework that is specialized to the international student versus the domestic student, but it should be the case that your choice of classes should give you the opportunity to be intermixed with, whether you're doing an LLM in the US or with domestic students in that jurisdiction. So that's our model at Texas A&M. Why is that relevant is because what that means is pretty much the length and breadth of the curriculum is open to our LLM students. So if a student really wants to become an academic, sure, they can take relatively more academic classes that involve writing papers and so on and so forth. And if a student wants to do more practice-oriented, they can do externships and they can do clinics and they can do these things that are open to them, and they can take classes that are more skills-based classes. My advice would be for those, so this is now a student who's not going to sit for the bar exam, so they have flexibility beyond one or two required things. For those students, I would say it's a mix, right? Start with what you want to do, what you are trying to get from it in terms of, is it IPR, is it arbitration, is it energy law, is it business law, whatever else it is, and then say, let me take a mix of courses that are giving me the foundational knowledge, I mean not foundational knowledge, but the specialized knowledge of this field, and then also that's helping me develop the skills that when I come back to India or back to China or even try to find an opportunity in the United States, I am bringing something valuable to the table. That the employer looks at my resume and says, okay, so I see you took these classes. That's very interesting. Usually students have just taken these, but you've taken classes that really add value. Oh, I see that you've developed a lot of skill. Again, Professor Varga went to trade dress, right? As opposed to just, I took IP classes, right? I have a specialized knowledge in this particular thing. That is something that you can take back, whether to home or to another, or to the jurisdiction, United States or elsewhere, and bring that to bear. So that's our model, is this integrated model. Again, for those students who want to sit for the bar, they have more dictates. But for those who don't, there's a flexibility, and then we look to students to sort of come up with the appropriate blend of specialized knowledge classes and skills classes that will make them most effective in terms of what they want to do on the back end.
Another thing I've seen, the LLM from abroad or from foreign, LLM otherwise also is more preferred with in-house positions with the corporates and MNCs and things, so they really look at your LLM, where are you from? So there's a lot of difference between how law firms are looking at LLM and how in-house.
Mic is not catching on. I have to hold it.
Okay, all right. I'm moving my hand too much. So what I'm saying is that in-house, especially MNCs and corporates, look at LLM more seriously, and they give a lot of preference other than law firms in India.
If I can just say one
Yeah,
thing
please,
to
ma'am.
it, right? Ultimately, having a career, each individual career is it's kind of like parenting, right? There is no strict book. And one path to success, there is no only path to success, rather. It's really a question of understanding where you're working, what that entails. If you're practicing in the Delhi High Court versus Karnataka High Court, what that entails, right? If you're practicing in India versus United States, what that entails, right? How should you be different in the US and how should you be different in India, right? If you're an academic versus a practitioner, what does that mean, right? So what are the ingredients for success in academics versus you write, you publish, and those ingredients of success are not the same everywhere, right? In India, teaching is a very, very important ingredient for success, right? So the more courses you teach, the more successful you are. And that's not the same thing in the US, right? So understanding the ingredients of success in your particular place of employment is an absolutely important, right, important thing. And so I think each person draws their own, their own little drawing to get to that success in their career, right? And I also feel, as someone who's old now, I have to say, right? You're all looking incredibly young, right? So success is also, it doesn't mean that you're always, you get a promotion every day, you get a promotion every year. It's a relative concept. You win some, you lose some, and at the end of the day, you're probably going to lose more than you win, right? But that's still, again, right? You learn from your both wins and losses, and then, collect your chips and move on, right? So that's, so that's something you have to be ready for.
So I wanted to ask you something. So we got a sense of, how the entire curriculum can be made a little more practical from Bobby, what Bobby told us. If you can tell how you teach specific courses, so if you can tell us how you make your course more professionally relevant, how do you cater? So if there were students taking your course, especially from India,
right,
what kind of benefit, what could they expect to get that they couldn't get from an Indian LLM or from an Indian course that they've already done an LLB? And also after that, I want you to talk a little bit about, would that be a lot different if somebody did JD instead of doing an LLM?
So first I'll take the how do I teach differently for a upper level course, right? So there are two things you see in every course that you teach, right? So first is to ensure that the basics are clear, right? And I always feel as a professor, that's my job, right? And it doesn't matter whether you practice or whether you're going into academics, having strong basics is the best way to, that's an important ingredient for success. So, so that's what we cover in the first few weeks, right? But as you progress into the course, into the semester, then we kind of integrate everything that you do with, well, if this happens in practice, my best example is really I teach patent law, right? And we go through, patent law is very, very sort of technical, right? So when we teach the different, say, sections in the US code, we talk about how the sections are arranged, why it's arranged in the manner in which it is, and then we talk about if you're advising a client, then what are the kind of things you'll tick to make sure that the invention is patentable, right? But after you look at all of that, say an entire area of, say, the ingredients required to get a patent, then then we essentially talk about what do you think is the most important thing that the client will need. If you have a client who walks in and says, I created something 5 years back, right? Now I want to patent it. What's the one thing that you would say, right? To honestly tell the client whether it is patentable or not, right? So once the basics are clear, we very, very consciously integrate, right, the realities of practice into it. I also refer a lot to the manual of patent examination practice, the MPEP, which when I teach in India, I refer to the MPP, right, the manual for patent prosecution. Similarly, I was talking in Krishna College, a couple of weeks back, which is a college in Coimbatore, where I also gave a lecture on trademarks, right? So when we were talking, I initially started with some US brand. We talked about Red Bull, and the entire set of people just went like this. Then I talked about trade dress for parachute coconut oil. I said, okay, let's forget Red Bull. Let's talk about the blue bottle of parachute coconut oil. And immediately the class went, oh, I have another, I wasn't teaching a class, but I was making a presentation, and I said anyone can ask a question. Somebody asked a question about the red color for SpiceJet, right? So it really is how you connect with the students, right? And you can connect with them at different level. Once you make the connection, the questions and the interaction with the students automatically will bring a sense of realism and practice-oriented reality into it.
I have a further question on that.
Oh, you have, okay.
Like
No, I'll let Bobby finish.
on this what,
Okay.
what she just said.
Yeah.
So so when we teach courses which are practical courses, when we say, what we do is, for example, in IP, so we focus on primarily
Forms.
3-4 areas. So one is that we want them to learn how to register. So in patents, we'll want them to learn how to draft a claim, how to actually file it, where to file it, and what's the process, what should they expect at the registry. If they want to do international registration, what kind of challenges may come up. And so that is one. Then we'll want them to learn how to do assignment agreements, licensing agreements across the world in different jurisdictions maybe. Also, you would want them to learn litigation-related drafting.
Right.
So if you're drafting various kind of application, if you're asking for an injunction, then like draft an thing for injunction. Then it could also monitoring services, because these are the services that people are buying in the marketplace.
Right.
So I would want, if I was going to be an IP lawyer, then I would, apart from understanding the theoretical basics, the problem is that when I go to work in a law firm or in a company, they ask me to do that and I'm not ready for it, and it's a big problem because a lot of workplace stress, people leaving jobs prematurely or getting being asked to leave, and many of these problems are happening. Many lawyers are struggling with this. So given this scenario, and this is the biggest reason even 𝗨𝗂 coexists, or why many people are in this room, for this reason. It's not just that an USL. So if you can tell us how you solve these kind of issues in your class.
So so you were talking about drafting and prosecution and so on, right? So we actually introduce our patent class with a patent, right? So we start with what is a patent, because it's easier, if they see a patent, and then we talk about the components of patents, right? And from there, once you know the components of patents, then you go into what each components mean, which is the theoretical aspect, right? So once you know what each components mean, we talk about how do you get your patent, right? In fact, and that's just not me, I'm sure that's how a couple of others who teach patents also do. We clearly divide it into, if you're an inventor, what are the things that you have to be careful about, the kind of notes you have to keep, the, how statutory notes and also notes as evidence later, right? And if you're a practitioner, the kind of things you'll seek from your inventor, how would you file your patent? Patent prosecution is at least a week. Right, we talk about the entire process of prosecution, and then we talk about infringement and how you go to the district court, and then how do you, if there is an appeal, where would you appeal? If there is a Markman hearing, what would you do? So we do each one of those. So I think practice aspects are integrated naturally. So when I teach, for example, trade secrets, we definitely show a lot of assignment and non-confidentiality agreements. We put up these clauses. We kind of talk about why one clause is better than another clause in terms of two clauses. So it definitely does help, right? But I do want to say, so we raise both academic as well as practice-oriented questions. So why is this clause better than that clause is a practice-oriented question, right? So is it always possible to sign a non-confidentiality agreement in an employment setting, right? If I'm a huge, say, film director, right, and I have a new writer who's talking with me, it may not be possible to sign a non-confidentiality agreement. So those kind of things, how do you solve it, is a academic question. So a student who likes to go into academics will pick on the academic question, while a student who goes into practice would pick on the other question. And so that's how the whole thing, right, goes.
Your question about JD versus LM, I do want to say this, the only slight pushback I would give is that the variance in practice across even individual firms and counties and states and so on and so forth is such that I do think there is a balance of the skills you learn, the foundational skills that you learn in an academic setting, and the applied skills that really come in practice. So I wouldn't overestimate the reality is that the phrase we use in the US is we talk about practice ready graduates. And whenever I have a lawyer at a law firm tells me, we want practice ready graduates, I said, right, then give me a map of your office to show me where the copying machine is. so I can show it to them in advance, and then when they get to your firm, they know which room has the copying machine. And of course, they immediately said, that's not what I meant. I said, well, what did you mean? Practice ready means I got to be able to know where the copying machine is so I can make the copies in time to file. But you got to do that, right? Okay, then once I've gotten that far, then it's let's work back from there. What are the other things that are grounded in your particular practice and what you do? So I don't want to overstate that. I do think a good program, again, as Professor Raghavan is describing, really does give a good foundation in those kinds of things, but we don't overstate it. I would be careful about overstating it too, in the sense of it still will be the case that when you show up on day one, you have a lot to learn still, no matter how many, if you did 10 LLMs, you'd still have a lot to learn. So you asked about the JD versus LLM. So I will say there is a growing number of international students who are coming to the US to do a JD. The JD obviously is the ordinary, the default practice degree in the US, so overwhelming majority by a wide margin in the US of practicing lawyers have gotten a JD. That said, a JD is more time and more money in two forms, more money in terms of payment, more money in terms of opportunity costs, lost income, right? That you're not, instead of making money for those 2 years, you're instead paying tuition. JD programs are also, the admissions process looks different. So there's a lot of differences. So what I tell those students is, just you need to give thought to, given your goals, where you want to practice, how you want to practice, this kind of thing, is the JD the order of the day. I will say that there are some foreign jurisdictions where, basically is, okay, if you have a JD from the US, let's talk. If not, then not much. I'd be surprised if that's where India is today. So it's a little bit of, I wouldn't try to dissuade you. I mean, for us and for other schools, again, there is a growing number of JDs who are international students, but I would make sure that that makes sense for you, given very different admissions, given additional time, given additional payment for tuition, and given lost opportunity, that there's several years of practice and earning income that you're losing in that situation. So that's how I think about the JD versus LLM trade-off.
And I think we should not also confuse with like finishing school and LLM. They are two very, very different things. Yeah, because I feel LLM is a master's degree, and we all do, we have master's degree in so many other courses other than law. It has its own significance. You are a master in that particular subject or this thing. And when we, like you said, practice ready, I think that's more like a finishing school. After, when you go into a legal practice, what are the basic things you need to know? I think that's separate from this thing. I think somewhere we are getting confused.
Okay, that's good for me to know that. Acha, okay, please, you have a question? Yeah.
I'd really like us to get to the career opportunities for foreign lawyers in the state of Texas. I haven't heard any so far.
Sure. Okay, we'll get to that. No problem.
Something called a foreign law consultant. I researched a bit, and I think Texas Bar is one of the first to recognize somebody as a foreign law consultant right after the New York Law.
Sure.
We've heard a lot about the importance and significance of different types of LLM. I'm sure everybody in this room just wants to know how to get to Texas.
How to get to Texas.
And what are the career opportunities? I am here to understand, is there any...
Sure, so thanks for that question. Yeah, so of course, see, we are going to talk a little bit about LLM and like different things, but definitely let's get to that quickly now. So I think Bobby is the right person to start with that.
I can speak to some of it, although I didn't have that sense. So let me say a couple of different pieces. One I mentioned earlier, which is that Texas, not every state allows a non-JD to sit for the bar exam. So that's the first thing you have to look at is for a given state, who is eligible to sit for the bar exam. Some states allow students who have earned an LLM to do so, some do not. I think it's the case that every state that does allow an LLM to sit for the bar exam, there are curricular requirements for the LLM, the content of that LLM. So that's piece number one. Now, there are a small number of states that allow a foreign-trained lawyer to sit for the bar exam without an LLM or a JD. California has some provisions for that. They are fairly narrow and complex provisions, so it's not my understanding, although I want to be clear, I don't want to purport to know more than I do. It's not my understanding that many foreign-trained lawyers come to be licensed in California to practice law via that route, via the non-degree route. I think it's a very narrow path to navigate. So now then to the foreign law specialist. I didn't know that Texas is among the states, though. Again, I take you as your word. So there are some again analogously sort of fairly narrow provisions. There, I would distinguish between, and again, I didn't know Texas, but in the states where I know do have those provisions, I would distinguish between eligibility and applicability, or efficacy, maybe is the right word. So they're not, it's not my understanding that there are substantial numbers of folks engaged in this foreign law specialist practice rule. I think Georgia, actually, where I was before, did have it, and there were lawyers who came to do it, but I would say I met in the course of 20 years in Georgia 2, right? So it's not a wide thing. Now, all of that said, this is the part that I was sort of comes back to where I started. It's hard to know today whether the gap between what is allowed and what is effective is representative of where the world is going. So, for example, it turns out, as I mentioned earlier, there are lots of now Indian companies that are doing substantial business in Texas. There's a large population of South Asians in Texas, in Dallas-Fort Worth, where we are, also in Houston. Other places do, but particularly in those two big cities. Can I imagine that landscape is changing, such that you could imagine that these companies and even individuals and organizations with some connection to India would find the foreign law specialist with a background in Indian law to be an attractive person to look to for legal services and to sort of hire and so on and so forth. It's possible, but I as of today, I'm not sure that that's there. So let me say the one other piece and then see if it's responsive. So then in terms of LLMs, again, when they've done it in the States, they are then fully licensed lawyers. So I want to make sure we're distinguishing. So at least as I understand it, the states that have the foreign law specialist, it's a pretty narrow realm of practice, right? Pretty narrow set of things you're eligible to do. On the other hand, earning an LLM and then sitting for the bar and passing the bar exam and earning a JD and passing the thing, there is no distinction on the back end in terms of your scope of practice. So that LLM graduate can practice any area of law, at any level, so on and so forth, in the same way that a JD would, for what that's worth. Okay, so I don't know if that was responsive in terms of.
I'll answer that.
Please, yeah.
Can you pass the mic?
Yeah, give him the mic. It's not
But the Indian IT firms that are there, they are horrendous body shoppers. Most of them are being investigated by various departments of the United States for
Yeah.
violations.
Turn it on. Yeah.
So they are never going to look at an Indian lawyer other
Yeah.
than to, ship him out and
Yeah.
earn some money out of him. So I know this from experience. So the Indian IT companies or any Indian company in Texas is not going to hire an Indian lawyer. That won't help.
That I would slightly disagree with. We already have been, it has been like we have been engaging with Texas A&M University for the last, I think, 20 days, not more. Okay, 20 days, maybe a month. And already we have spoken to lawyers who are keen to shift to Texas and get a license because their company, Indian company, which also has an office there, is saying that why don't you shift there? If you
And do what?
and practice law, right? To practice law. So this is one thing. The other thing is that it's not only IT companies. Even IT companies, you have to realize that things have changed a lot, and especially companies like 𝗏𝗔C is also there. 𝗏𝗔C is buying fracking companies in California. Not only that, the tune of trade between Texas and India is massive. Texas is the topmost outward investment destination for India. So when Indians have invested the most anywhere in the world in Texas, and so the number of companies is also massive. There are at least 50 companies from Texas which have invested in India, and they have operations here. So what happens is that if they have a lawyer who's, I'm not saying, even if not full-time lawyer, even if this is a part-time, maybe a part of that person's work, to advise on Indian legal system, because they would like to have lawyers practice who have Indian experience, who can explain to them the contracts they are entering into in India, or even help them to interface with Indian lawyers, Indian businesses. And it so happens that, I don't want to take names of any companies, that 2 cases in the last few days where they are excited about, going to doing an LLM and getting a bar qualification, because their companies are saying that if you do that, we are happy to move your base to Texas.
Sir, this thing about the FLC, the foreign law consultant, there is something reference, this is the clear reference to that on the Texas Bar Association's page.
Yes.
And I was presuming that, and there is a very huge list of foreign law consultants who are in Texas today. I think that number is around 400 or 450 from different parts of the world. So I'm presuming this, the last part of your conversation right now, where you said Texas companies or companies from there investing here would want an FLC, an Indian lawyer sitting there in Texas, to be able to gain quick access to.
Not necessarily FLC. I have not checked into it, but those people are planning to take the bar. Like maybe when initially they join, they will be FLC perhaps, but they are looking to become full-time qualified lawyers in the US. See, the reason why you would want to become an FLC, in reality when you apply, one very important thing. I've been studying bar exams across the world, because it is a area where 𝗨𝗂 wants to venture, okay, training for bar exams. And what I realized is that across the world there are many jurisdictions where these kind of things are allowed. Like for example, even when I study the Texas bar exam rules or Texas Bar Association rules, it seems to me that it is theoretically possible that even without doing an LLM, you might be able to register. Singapore, for example, okay, you might be able to give the bar exam. But what happens is that then they have very stringent requirements of which university you have graduated from. One thing that they say is that, okay, if it is a Commonwealth country, we'll consider. But when you go with saying that, okay, I am from this university, they say, we are not able to do an equivalency. We are not sure. So therefore, why don't you do these courses in the US and therefore become eligible? So that barrier comes up a lot of times.
So is it good to understand that the career opportunities, those are the title of this evening, the only way to get to that is to first go through an LLM? Is that the way to understand this evening?
I'm not saying that. What I'm suggesting to you is that the difference of the delta between the cost and time and effort between getting a FLC and LLM, if it is so little, then it may make sense to do the LLM rather than do an FLC. Because for me, the way I see right now, it is my personal opinion from my limited understanding, that I'd rather, if I had to go and take maximum advantage of the opportunities that exist, I will rather get a bar exam license, in a full bar exam license, given that it's not that difficult, given that it's not that expensive. For a lot of people that I have spoken with, their difficulty of going and getting a degree from the US seems to appear from the fact that it is costing around 90 lakhs to 1 crore, right? So if you are going to spend that much money getting from New York or from California, which are the usual destinations for Indian lawyers to get an LLM from, okay, right? Harvard, Stanford, or Massachusetts, but even in Harvard is very expensive, and you have New York law schools which are expensive, and living there is very expensive. Now, if it is going to cost you in that range, then the recovery of, and it becomes, then I might say that, okay, why not, let's see if I can get FLC in a more inexpensive way, right? But if it is not like that, and if it is going to cost me 1/3 of that, or I'm not saying any number, but like pretty much living costs are half or 1/3, and then it changes the equation entirely. So if you can be fully licensed to practice there, it is definitely better than just being registered as a foreign licensed attorney. Now, one thing I want to also emphasize on is that the opportunities not only to practice over there as a foreign license, you might, the nature of the global, and I'm going to ask the other panelists also about this soon. The way I see it is that in the past 1 or 2 years, I have had interactions with US lawyers who are very interested in outsourcing work in India. And I'm not talking about big companies. It is not LPO model. They, like, there's a huge, sometimes even to fill up a insolvency form, or somebody is doing a immigration form. It's just a form. It's not even an agreement that you're drafting. Somebody is filling up a form and you have to pay $1,000. And that's normal over there. Now, when somebody who has experience in India and in US realizes that this is a massive opportunity, and if you are, recently we shared one with many, I don't know, many of you may read it, a story of a lawyer from US, right, from New York, who's basically not living there, he's living in Asia, and he's doing litigation in US because he appears via phone. He has US numbers and fax forwarding numbers and stuff. People don't even realize that he's not in the US. His clients don't know that he's not in the US, but he's most of the time in various Asian places. And then, sorry?
There is a firm in Gurgaon which does, they do entire patent prosecution in an office, and I've been there at least twice. There is this guy who comes from North Carolina. I used to know his name. Now I'm like getting too old. He visits every 15 days. They're like 20 people, and now probably more. They do entire patent, all the documentation, everything, and then they go file it there. I mean, there is a place in Coimbatore that does that.
Can you use the can you use the mic for the recording? You can use the mic, it'll be great.
Is there a way the reverse can happen? We can go to Texas for 20 days and...
in fact,
that is being done. That is being done.
Yeah.
If
you are licensed to practice in Texas...
How are these North Carolina guys coming here and doing this? We're not allowed to go to Texas and do this.
No, they are not.
You absolutely are.
It is Indians who are doing it. It is Indian lawyers. They are going to North Carolina, or even the North Carolina person is coming to India and taking up residence here and benefiting from the lower cost of
That's
lawyers.
They're just benefiting from the low cost, nothing more than that. Are there ways where lawyers from India can go to Houston or New York?
Yes, that is what we are saying.
No, Manoj, I forget his name. He has one of the biggest, what's his name? Manoj Pillai. Just Google him sometime. He does work. He was in Kerala. He's moved to California recently. There are, opportunities abound. When I started my, SJD, I wanted to make some money. There was this Michigan law school graduate. He was a second generation Indian. He had actually had a, small setup in Bangalore. He would get work from small mid-sized firms in the US, and people in Bangalore were writing the briefs, right? At that same rate, he was paying me and I was doing the briefs for a while, so to make some money. So, Sundari Krishna, I think is the last name, one of my seniors from NLS. She worked at a top law firm, White & Case if I'm not wrong, in New York, came back, set up back-end operations in Hyderabad. Hers is one of the biggest law firms in Hyderabad. She does back-end operations. So it works both ways. It really is a question of how you network and how you use the opportunities. I know people who have gone from here to there and people who have come from there to here too. It's not...
I just want to tell you something, that practice of law in the US is quite different and more entrepreneurial than in India. You can literally run Google ads, right, which is impossible here. So you can say that anybody who's searching for information in that, you can have Google ads where you say that, people are charging $1,000, I'll charge $500. And that'll work because people are looking for that. Okay, and not only that, you can you can take investment and run that, and you can focus that. Okay, I will build online. People are building tools like that. I'll build an app for doing this and this only, and people can do it themselves and get a little minimal. So you need a little bit of different kind of thinking. But if you are licensed to practice in the jurisdiction, that opens up a lot of avenues for you as to how you exactly want to do it, because if you are licensed to practice there, you can even solicit work for that jurisdiction no matter where else you are in the world, right? So that is one way to think of it, and maybe you can...
Yeah, and even these dual qualified dual qualified lawyers in India, I still remember there were firms, large firms who are doing cross-border transactions or M&As and all. They prefer the guys who are qualified from outside jurisdiction to handle their matters, because foreign law firms couldn't get to the thinking and the strategy with the Indian law firms. So a lot of these guys who've done their qualification get better jobs here because they can mediate and they can make understand the transaction better to each other. So there is on one side the foreign lawyers, the Indian lawyers, and sometimes they just cannot understand, because the way you practice law in India is so different, the way they practice there, their processes are different, their thinking is different, strategy is different. So they use these lawyers who are dual qualified, who has done their bars or whatever, LLM, whatever from abroad, to use them for this purpose. And another thing very interesting is also there that all these guys who go like to UK and they all work under the India desk of the foreign law firms, they're all dual qualified guys. So because liberalization is still not allowed in India, so what is happening is that all our lawyers are going abroad and they are all dual qualified. So when a transaction comes to them, the India part, they do it. They do it sitting there. And they do the foreign part also. And they only sign the opinion by an Indian lawyer. According to me, we are losing so much of income because we have not liberalized the whole process of law. Otherwise, all this work would have come to India, because all those companies are actually having businesses in India, but because they cannot practice, they cannot do anything here. It's not opened up, right? So according to me, so those guys are also doing the same thing, but they're doing it on the other side. And similar thing can happen on this side also. Let's say there's a firm here and they are doing cross-border transactions or M&As or whatever, so they can use these lawyers.
So there's a question there, I think. And
Yeah, can somebody pass a mic there?
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for organizing this event. I just had a bunch of questions. I'm sorry to take your time. Since we're discussing about career opportunities, the issue is not about the possibility of your career, whether in India or in Texas. It's about, essentially in today's day and age, it's about visa requirements. So if you do graduate from a Texas university, are there firms in Texas willing to hire you? Because the median salary for a private sector from Texas right now is about 70 grand, 70,000 US dollars annually. Since US also has requirements of a certain figure that if you earn this much, will you be able to grant a visa? Are there firms, not Indian, obviously, American law firms or American companies willing to offer visas to foreign nationals? That's question one. Question two would be, what is your opinion on the ROI as opposed to from Texas to, let's say, an Ivy League? Because Texas is about, let's say, $60,000 and Ivy League would be about $80,000 in terms of annual fees. So what is the ROI possible for an Indian student applying to a University of Texas A&M as opposed to, let's say, applying to a Columbia, Harvard, or one of the Ivy Leagues, in terms of employability as well as ROI?
Yeah. So first, yes, great questions. First, in terms of the visa category, so remember, the first thing is that the visa system, once upon graduation, a student can, for up to a year, if they haven't used their OPT, it's called optional practical training, prior to graduation. If they've used none of it, for up to 12 months after graduation, they're eligible to work under their student visa category. That's number one. Two, they can then apply, if there is an employer who is willing to sponsor them for an H-1B, then they're eligible potentially to remain beyond that 12-month period. This again comes back to what I said earlier. It's a little bit what the goal is. So, and I think this was on, if you watched the webinar we did, I said, if a student came to me and said, I only want to do an LLM in the United States if I'm guaranteed to be able to remain there for 2 to 3 or 4 years of work, I would say you shouldn't come. Because I don't think the system is structured in a way that it can offer that guarantee of eligibility of finding an employer who is willing to sponsor. So your question was not that.
That's the same in Ivy also, even Ivy League.
That's no difference of Ivy League or somebody else. So I'm going to come back to the Ivy League question in a minute. So in general, that's the idea. So then, are there employers who? Of course there are. Every day while we had this meeting, there are employers in Texas who are sponsoring employees for H-1B visas. How many, so on and so forth, obviously goes up and down and varies. And also depends on what it is that you're bringing to the table. So if somebody is bringing in specialized knowledge of Indian law in area X and has then developed a specialized knowledge of that area of law on the US side, that's going to be a more plausible candidate because the employer says, this is a skill set I am not going to be able to recreate other than by incurring the cost of sponsoring this, this potential employee's visa. So that's the visa landscape. So in general, what I tell students is, at least the baseline from my vantage ought to be, I am getting an education in the United States or whatever jurisdiction that is giving me some training and some skills that are valuable. Those serve good said. I'm getting some experience, this is OPT, for 12 months after that. And then, might it be that I, at that point, want to remain? And might it be that I have the opportunity? Absolutely. And is it worth pursuing? Sure, it's worth pursuing. But I would be nervous about any student coming to my law school on that premise. I'm certain there are law schools that say, come get your LLM here. That none of them will say we guarantee because they're smart lawyers. But will say, this is all the students who do this. I just would be nervous about doing that. Not because of Ivy League or not Ivy League, but because, again, it's too much of a risky proposition. Return on investment. Too many variables for me to say anything too precise about that. But here's the way I would think about it: is what are you getting when you get a degree? To some extent, you're getting brand, right? To some extent, you are getting specialized knowledge, right? And then you are bearing a cost associated with that proposition. So the first thing to say is the cost differentials can be massive. Right, so I want to be clear. Like the cost differentials range from 0 to, by the time you incur both tuition costs and cost of living, at least for any Ivy League school located in New York or in California or so on and so forth. You potentially are talking about a cost of, on the low end, $80,000, on the high end, $100,000 to $110,000 for 1 year, right? And that's much larger, in fact, infinitely larger than 0, which is, at least as a matter of some places, students will go and they're getting a full ride. So the return on investment there is infinite, right? Relatively speaking. So now, that's not going to be that extreme most of the time. But again, that's the way I would think about it, is to start with that question of, at the intersection of the cost of tuition, the cost of living comparison, and then any scholarship support you're getting, right? Which again is also going to vary. Tuition varies widely based on public or private, and even among privates and even among public. Scholarships vary widely, and cost of living vary. You weigh all of those costs, and then the question is what are you then getting on the other side? So again, I can't speak to the Indian market in a perfectly rational way. We can get sort of more expert guidance on that. My guess would be that the brand does some amount of work, but the specialized training does some amount of work also. So to the extent to which what you got was, you showed up and you took a lockstep set of classes with a bunch of other international students, you may have gotten a degree from an Ivy League school, but you didn't get any content, right? You might as well have gotten the degree and watched television for that year of time, because there's nothing in your experience or the content. On the other hand, you go to a school, and again, this is where I tell everyone, I think you heard me say, for intellectual property, A&M is one of the top 10 in the United States, right? So as a practical matter, a student comes to us is going to walk away with a very strong foundational specialized training in intellectual property, in which they would have gotten very close attention from faculty, because it's a relatively small program as opposed to a program of 400 or 500 students. So then there's a return on that. Now, does that mean that you should go, or X should go, or Y should go to A&M versus going to Harvard? Of course not. That's not at all the choice. But that's the analysis that I would say you want to go through. Yeah. And I'm suspicious that the brand alone is such a big difference that it dwarfs how much you learned, how much attention you got, whether you developed networks, how much money you paid for rent, and how much money you paid for tuition, right? The gap in brand, I don't think is big enough to justify that.
Can I just bring you back for one last point to the scholarship that you mentioned? What are the scholarships available at A&M?
Varied widely. So again, for our model is we want to make it for a student who has, as a matter of language skill and background and academic skills, work experience they have, all the things that we look at to evaluate whether a student will succeed during and afterwards, we want to find a way to get that student there. So for that student, we're going to push our scholarships as high as we possibly can for them to be able to get there. For students who are, good, obviously we're not going to admit anyone we don't think is qualified. For students who are qualified, but, if they come, they come. If not, we're not going to do the same thing. So again, on the bottom end, 0%. Then have we seen scholarships above 50%? We have. But I want to be clear. It's not a number. Oh no. We've done full scholarships too. So we have those students. But again, that student is coming and we expect them to earn not one but 2 Nobel Prizes on the back end. So if you have the credentials, then no, I'm being silly, but that's the idea. Is that again? So it's not. We don't have a formula that we're using. We're evaluating individual candidates, and I think I was saying to one of you, students don't even apply for scholarships for us. There's no applying for scholarships. Every student, if you get accepted, you are the immediate. What the flip side of accepted is, we're evaluating what scholarship we can give to you. So what that means functionally is, to be clear, we have students who have no need for a scholarship, in the sense of their father is a billionaire, and yet they receive scholarship because they're a highly qualified student that we're trying to attract.
Can you throw a bit more light on the credentials one should have to get a scholarship?
Sure. Not to get a scholarship, the credentials for admission. Because the credentials for admission are the same credentials, is what I want to emphasize. The question was asked, elaborate on what are the qualifications for scholarship, and I said, for admission, that they're the same for admission. So what are we looking at? Let me start with one that's less applicable here but in general, when we're admitting international students, is language skill, right? Because we want to evaluate how is a student going to perform in the classroom and succeed, and so on and so forth. So language skill is one thing we look at. Another thing we look at is academic credentials. So academic credentials is 3 factors. Where did you go to school? What classes did you take? And what did you do in terms of your grades? And it's all of those, right? None of those are singularly, it's not, I went to a good school, I got bad grades. I don't care, went to a good school. Likewise, I went to a terrible school and I got very good grades. So it's all of those. It's where did you go, where did you study? What was your course of study? So a student who did a rigorous course of study rather than a more demanding rather than less demanding will be impacted. And then how they performed academically. So that academic performance is a second piece. The third piece is experience, right? So what experience? Work experience could be, do you have work experience? Did you go and you worked for a summer, for 6 months, for a year, 2, 3, and did something? But it could also be other kinds of experiences, right? So what are the activities that a student is involved in? What programs have they been part of? What social service and volunteering things have they done? All of that is experience that we are interested in terms of evaluating. Is this someone, again, who's going to succeed and upon graduation will continue to succeed, right? And the last one I'd say, and this relates to the last one, is this someone who we want in the community, right? Does their application, their experience, their background, what they say about themselves in their personal statement, does it convey that this is an interesting person, right? Yeah. This is someone who is going to be someone that I'd say, like, I'm excited to have this student walk in my office and say, hey, I have a question, or I want to talk about something, this kind of thing. So that's a fourth factor that I would say that we are evaluating as well.
And so these things you mentioned, grade, brand, and subjects you have studied, these all matter equally? So the credentials, the academic credentials, one should have these grades, brand, the college you go to, and the subjects you have studied. These all matter equally, or there is some proportion?
No, they clearly don't all matter equally. Yeah. But the reason I'm hesitating in my answer is I think we don't admit based on an exam, right? It's not a formula. So as a result, they don't weigh all equally. But again, I jokingly said, will you win? If you have already won a Nobel Prize, that's probably going to be dispositive relative to where you went to school, even if you don't speak much English, so on and so forth. I'll come teach you English in that situation. On the other hand, somebody has done an incredibly challenging course of study at a challenging university and has gotten perfect grades. Again, their English isn't so good. Let's figure out their English separately. They're kind of boring otherwise. I can deal with it, right? So, no, they don't weigh all equally. And they don't even all weigh the same in any given case, right? There's a hydraulic, we think of it as, right? So more of this outweighs less of something else, right? So it's not there's not an algorithm that we are plugging the stuff into. right? It really is, again, the term we use is, we talk about holistic admission. Holistic, HOLISTIC, holistic admission. Why? Because we literally are reading an application and saying, yeah, good, we should admit. Or, oh my God, terrible, we shouldn't admit. Or they're in the middle, let's read it again, right? It's sort of the way you think about it.
Okay.
So basically, be a lawyer and sell yourself.
Okay.
Right? It really is a question of highlighting your skills,
Yeah, what is
highlighting
it that
your
you- yeah.
positives, and right? So the things that you've done that you believe are different from the rest of the pack, right? So it's really a question of highlighting those and, keeping us interested,
Yeah.
right?
Another question.
Last strength in LLM program. How many students do you admit in LLM program?
Great. So we have, the question was, how many students do we admit into the LLM program? So we are again, as I mentioned, the law school has been part of Texas A&M only for 6 years now, 6.5 years, I should say. So we are building a lot of these programs as we go. So let me say that to begin. 2, I would differentiate, we have online programs and we have not online programs. So our online programs, including we have LLMs, online LLM programs, are sort of, not separate, but they are, we think of them as a separate category. So for the online LLM, I believe we currently have about, I think about 20, 25 students in our fully online LLM. We have about 10, 15 students in our residential LLM program. So how many do we admit, to be honest with you? How many qualified students are going to come? Now, if there are 400 qualified applicants, I'm likely to say, okay, 400, I'm not ready to have 400 come tomorrow. We're not equipped because our model is, this is not a mechanism to generate revenue. It's a mechanism to to create the community we want. And so I don't want to bring in 400 students who I can't provide a quality education to. So that's what's driving us. If the qualified pool is 10, then I'm going to admit 10. If the qualified applicant pool is 30 or 40, it's for 30 or 40. If it's 100 or more, I then have to begin to revisit. Maybe we have to stage it a little bit. Because again, I want to make sure we're providing that. You had a follow-up?
Question to that is all these programs are registered or sort of affiliated to ABA, American Bar Association?
Yeah. So all of our programs are the ABA doesn't approve. The question was, are they all, whatever, how do they fit with the ABA, the American Bar Association? So the ABA doesn't approve non-JD programs other than JDs. They acquiesce in them, is the term they use. So they have to be submitted, though, for acquiescence by the ABA. So all of them have been subject to ABA acquiescence, though, again, they are different. So an online LLM does not permit you to sit for the bar exam. Only a residential one does. So there are differences in terms of what is permitted for the different programs, but all of them are subject to that ABA.
Acquiescence means it is not fully accepted or something like that?
No. There is no approval. There is no, the ABA, as a matter of some weird principle that someone decided 20 or 25 years ago, decided that we only are the ABA in terms of accreditation as to JD degrees, not as to any other degree. So all they are doing is they are evaluating, this is true at Harvard, at Yale, at Princeton, not Princeton, at Harvard and Yale and Texas A&M and every other law school. All they do with non-JD, LLM programs and other non-JD, SJD programs, all they are doing is they're evaluating, does this program in any way negatively affect the JD program? If it doesn't, it's your problem. You go do it. So no. So acquiescence is the highest. The Harvard LLM, the Duquesne LLM program, the ABA is acquiesced, and that's it. And ours at that same level. The ABA is talking about, if you're interested in accreditation, the ABA, we have a follow-up question here too. Can you pass it up, Tim?
Okay.
Yeah. The ABA has considered whether they might want to do approval process for these, but they're so different that the ABA, I think at the moment, is of the position that we're not going to get involved in that. Yeah.
Yeah, so my question was, what is the weightage of if someone has done very rigorous work in one particular field, let's say IBC, insolvency and bankruptcy, right? So if someone has worked like 6 months of internship or 1 year internship in that particular field, how does that thing will reflect on his, whatever it's called, in his application?
Positive, yeah.
Can you throw a bit more light on it?
What's the question? How will...
You focus on one area a lot.
A lot of industry work, real life, practical skills he has.
So for an LLM applicant?
Yeah.
Right? So if you've done, an internship, right? I always tell students, get a recommendation from your supervisor from there, right? Let the supervisor tell us that, you were exceptional, you did very well. So to us, it shows that you're a focused student, you're able to work in the area in which you've chosen to work, right? And that's very persuasive for us. Right? That you did your first year internship in a civil court and then your third year in a criminal court, that does not affect, because you're still in that age where you're trying to figure out what you like, right? So as long as all of these people or one of these people or two of these people are saying, look, this person was, was very focused, did a lot of hard work and did well, and once you get that recommendation letter, then we feel persuaded by your ability to be a part of the program.
Okay, we have to keep things brief now because we are past time.
Yeah.
Because we have really steaming food waiting. We don't want to keep you away from it. So yeah. So maybe the last question is anybody?
No. Others have, and I want to.
We'll answer quicker. You ask quick.
You're letting all the men talk.
And you can always ask questions during dinner also. Like we are here till 9 o'clock. Kind of here till 9, right?
Yes. No. So let's ask the questions.
Let's ask
we'll
the
get through a
questions
few,
quickly, and
then we
yeah.
can answer more after. And she wants women to prepare.
Yes, absolutely.
I
want
okay.
to hear more.
So I
female
had
voice.
3 questions, and all of them are somewhat different. Okay.
Yeah.
So first, as per my understanding, a grounded practice in a district in a district court, let's say in a small city, as opposed to a corporate law firm job, is much more difficult to get and work in a state like Texas with a district court practice than with a corporate law firm practice. That was my understanding. So would you like to put some light on it, whether that is true or not?
You want to practice in a district court in Texas?
No, sir. I am saying that one way you have a very grounded practice, let's say a criminal law practice in India, and the other you have a practice like of a general corporate field. And general corporate, I believe, is much more similar in US than a criminal law practice.
Are you asking about in terms of admission?
Yeah, so I'm saying that if someone is in litigation in India
versus that,
yeah.
Are you asking in terms of how easy it is to get admitted,
to get,
or to get a job afterwards?
To get a job afterwards.
Afterwards, okay. So get admitted, I believe, is, if not no distinction, minuscule distinction. Yeah. For afterwards, of course, it's the case that, again, it depends on what you want to do, right? So if someone wants to go into litigation, experience in litigation is going to do more work. And if someone's going to, that's the first piece. But of course, it is also the case that if we're talking about employment in the foreign jurisdiction, corporate and business practice transfers more readily across lines than criminal law practice, right? So again, in that sense, it depends, again, what you want to do, should drive it primarily. But yes, of course, one of these is more transnational, one of them is less transnational.
Okay, thank you. The other question is, suppose I do intend to pursue an LLM from Texas University, and there is a state bar exam that the state of Texas is offering. Now, is the curriculum of Texas University more inclined towards that particular state bar exam, or I am equally eligible and equipped to give, let's say, the New York bar exam?
Good. So the bar exams differ from state to state, number one. Number two, they differ less today than they did 5 years ago. More and more of the bar exams in the US is becoming standardized, so it's the same across all states. Most of the states still have even at least a little bit of their portion that's specific to that state, so there's not a lot of variance. So the big variance is not the curriculum in the sense of Texas versus New York. The big difference is how strong a curriculum does the school have for helping you pass the bar exam, right? That's what I would say is the primary distinction. And there's schools that say, good luck, you took some classes, we wish you well. And there's those schools that say, okay, look, here's a course or some courses that you can take that help increase your odds of passing the bar exam.
Okay. One last question. So in terms of...
you can take the New York bar exam, right? The answer
is that what you're asking? No. Oh, no. He was asking better prepare you.
Yeah.
You are allowed to take it, subject to meeting the requirements in terms of the curriculum. And again, and vice versa. So you can take an LLM in New York and sit for Texas and vice versa. But yeah, in terms of the specialty.
Only Texas will not work, yeah? He has to redo that in New York.
Or we went to
Each jurisdiction in US has their own bar exam.
No, ma'am, I'm clear on that. My question was answered, yeah. So my last question is, in terms of what a typical profile of a company or a law firm in US looks when they look for a particular candidate, and what is the typical very good profile that you would like to call for someone who wants to get a very good scholarship in your university? I know it's a very subjective thing, but again, when I was in my first year, I went to profiles on LinkedIn of all the people who get placed in a big law firm, and I saw some few things like 8 to 12 internships, 1 international mood, maybe one or 2 national moods, and so on and so forth. So I had a pretty good minimum level of requirement that I need to sort of tick the boxes so that I may be as good as them, at least theoretically. So do you have something like that in terms of scholarships and recruiters wanting to look for students?
I'm going to speak to the recruiters, and then others can speak too. On the scholarship, no, we don't. And I understand my guess is your anecdotal reconstruction, like I looked at these people, was more a function of what you were seeing, your glasses, than it was a function of what was there, honestly. Like I suspect you saw those, and so you saw, aha, I see a pattern here, and you didn't see the 10 over there that didn't do that. I would be very surprised if there are any law schools, let alone many law schools in the US that have a profile for what they're in, whether in their JD or their LLM. It's just not, it's not consistent with what legal practice looks like, right? There are lawyers who work in a small town in West Virginia that has more poverty than most of India has, right? And what they do is they go to people's homes and they figure out what are their needs. And then there's someone who, wears a 3-piece suit with a vest and a thing to work every day and works, 22 hours and is paid a mass amount. So what profile on the front end would tell me this versus this? They don't even look, they're basically not even the same species, right? So,
sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but yeah. I specifically wanted to know about a law firm in the US that would maybe hiring for a general corporate team.
You asked for scholarship, though, so I'm saying the scholarship part.
Okay. For recruitment first and scholarship second. Yeah.
You asked for both, so I'm speaking to the scholarship one.
Okay,
scholarship one, there is no profile that is going to predict it. For the law firms, I suspect some business background is probably relatively more attractive. And business background doesn't mean you have a degree in business. It might mean you took a course in finance, right? You learned some accounting, whether in school or otherwise. I suspect that some experience in the business world is probably of interest. That they would say, not necessarily you did transactional versus litigation, to point the clarification you were giving him. I don't think that's really it, but again, that you have some sense of what the business world looks like potentially would be. So those would be the main things that I would think that sort of, again, on the back end now, you've earned your LLM, and now we're trying to figure out who is more likely for a big law firm to be looking at. I would say those would be the things.
Graduate from India, LLM from outside, what chances he has to get a job outside? If there's a graduate from outside, LLM from outside, obviously has more chances, right?
So
Is that so?
I think so, though, again, I would say, but the inside, remember, has a JD. So I'd say it's the JD versus LLM. I don't know that it's particularly inside or outside that's doing the work in that regard. It's that LLM students are hired every year, and particularly those with specialized knowledge are hired with great regularity. But again, relative to JDs, they're not hired in the same numbers.
And it also depends on the area of practice. I mean, I know of immigration law firms that really does require, the preference is for foreign lawyers as opposed to local JDs, right? Because they want someone who's sensitive to the culture and so on and so forth. Same with some areas of patent practice, right? I mean, if you're working with a bunch of engineers who are going to do patent prosecution, then their preference is for someone who has the ability to, first go into that, and then, it's not about whether you have a JD or whatever, right? So it depends on the area of practice and, what that particular firm is looking for and so on and so forth.
So in Super Lawyer, we interviewed around 120 lawyers who went to different countries and did LLM and are practicing there currently. And one thing that we regularly saw, even during my interviews that I did for an hour with 𝗨𝗂𝘂𝗲 and all of that, those who had experience in India, like good 3, 4, 5, 10 years of experience, like 𝗏𝗏𝗏, for example, she had substantial experience of India experience. Then you go to an LLM, and then you have a really high chance of being able to figure out, because for them also, if you have done work and you know some amount of work, you bring some expertise on board, then there's a way higher chance of you getting a job there or being able to build a business there. Even it's interesting that it is so easy to get jobs in legal startups now. We forget, but legal startups is an entirely new category of employers, and in the US they are way more than in India, right? And in a legal startup, it's not only the legal work that a lawyer does, but also you can do sales, marketing, business development, like so many things, like branding. Lawyers do everything because you need legal brains to do that. Like in 𝗨𝗂𝘂𝗲𝗏, our marketing is legal lawyers, our sales team is lawyers, everybody has to be. So startups are like that, legal startups. So that also is an opportunity. But I would say this, that it may, I see a lot of people going to early. They are in a hurry to go and do an LLM, and they, within a year or two, they try to go as soon as possible. In those cases, I have seen less success. Even after clearing the bar exam, fewer people have been able to stay back and get a job. But anybody with a significant India experience and who's a good lawyer here is highly likely to do well if they want to stay back, get a job, way more easier. And also another thing is that, do you have the discipline to go and network with people? Because that's very important. Like all the people I saw, even there are people who even after 1 year of experience here went there and got a job, right?
I think it's your all-round personality, which is very, very important. It's not only good in academics, you have to be very good in everything that you are doing, whether it is extracurricular activities, how you are as a person in totality. I think that really makes a lot of difference. We hire people who have all of that also, because, and firms also look at, even in India, firms are looking at more those people rather than just, you may be getting 100 out of 100, but if you can't communicate, you can't meet, don't have good interpersonal skills, personality, everything counts.
Okay, we need to quickly move. We will not get time to it, they'll kick us out.
I would like the questions.
So please quickly, Amish. Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming over here. So a lot of discussion has happened about the opportunities in Texas, in the US, and in India. But one thing that comes to my mind is the opportunities for a lawyer to go from here to the US, get his master's over there, and probably even attempt the bar exam. What kind of opportunities does it open for this kind of an individual for business across the world? And this comes to my mind because of the fact that a couple of years ago, I got an email from an American entrepreneur sitting in Washington, which ended up me facing negotiations with a Hong Kong lawyer, with another Singapore lawyer, and dealing with one of their contractors in Sri Lanka. And that kind of, that was one situation where I felt sorely lacking in dealing with these individuals, dealing with these lawyers over there. I felt that, I don't know what these lawyers did over there, who were sitting over there in these multinational jurisdictions. But they clearly did something because of which they were able to tackle the situation much better than I was. So that is one question that comes to my mind.
So, and I'll say very briefly, there's a little bit what I was speaking to earlier about the way, I'm sure I didn't say it very articulately. I think and this isn't unique to the United States, if I came to India and I spent a year studying in India, right, in the midst of law school or after law school, of course it's the case that I would be more capable of then engaging an Indian lawyer in the future. Why? Because I had studied in India, I earned a degree in India, so on and so forth. But to be clear, I would be better at engaging a German lawyer as well.
Right.
Why? Because in doing that, I have changed, or I have a different frame of reference for how to understand the choice of legal rules, the structure of legal rules, the way legal process works. So I know the right questions to ask the German lawyer. I know the right things to focus on with the German lawyer in a way that I didn't before I spent that year there. So that's one point I would make. The second one I would say is that in a good program, it is structured in a way that, I mentioned this before too, it's structured in a way that if I came to India, I'm reversing it, that I am not sitting in a classroom with 15 American students, fellow Americans, right? I'm in a classroom with with Indian students. So I'm learning alongside them. We are together learning certain material. And that itself is an opportunity that I better understand India. But to be clear, ideally in that classroom, there is also a German law student and a Chinese law student and a Japanese law student. So now suddenly, it's not just that, oh, now I'm getting some exposure. It's also that I am actually working in exactly the way you were called upon to do that day. Right. So when we're in class talking about some particularly complicated patent prosecution or negotiation or mergers and acquisitions issue, suddenly in that room is exactly the situation that you faced in the real world. Because there's the Indian lawyer, Indian law professor, Indian lawyer, future Indian lawyer, future American lawyer, but also future Chinese lawyer and German lawyer and so on and so forth. So that's the way, and I'll say, that's what we're trying to build at A&M. It's a work in progress, but that's what we're trying to get to.
So as a follow-up, could you just talk about perhaps like the diversity that is there at Texas A&M?
Sure. Do you want to speak to it?
Okay, I will. So, the easiest way to say it is to pick up one of those brochures, right? So, if you see...
Yeah, you can pick up the brochures before you leave. You can, anybody's interested.
Right? So, there's me from India, obviously. There's Peter from Hong Kong. Irene from Italy, but lives in Singapore and does extensive Asian law, right? 𝗂𝗶𝗵, the Indian origin in the US so has an idea of both jurisdictions. We have Glenn Lunny without, he's an American. We have Vanessa from Spain. We have people from Mexico. Right, Guillermo from Mexico, who else? Felix from Germany. So, you've got all of these people from different, and you can see it just from, from the pictures, right? So just interacting with each one of them gives you an exposure to their cultures, who they are, how they handle things differently, right? And that itself opens up your world, right? So in that sense, I want to say Texas A&M is spectacularly different. No other law school has this kind of diversity. There was a time when UC Davis used to have it. I think Texas A&M leads the pack now. Am I right in saying that? Yep.
Great,
okay, we have to wrap, but anybody else?
I need a girl to ask a question. I'm not going to wrap up, so I need... I can't believe that all of you spend the time and energy to come here. I want some girls to ask questions.
Yeah, we have talked about the foreign lawyers, but what about the foreign academician? What are the scope for a foreign academician in US or in Texas?
Okay, Bobby first, and then I.
Well, so just very briefly, obviously we have one. The scope is it's a possibility. It's a real thing. The Exhibit A, we say. So what I would tell you is that that's a function of a number of things. One is I do think the brand does matter in academic context. So I don't want to, again, to be fair, I think that's important in that context. But the other piece that I would say is important is attention. Right, so there are SJD programs, LLM programs, SJD programs, where you are one of a cast of thousands, right? Which means functionally, you will spend 5 minutes talking to one professor one time in their office during office hours. On the other hand, there are schools where the programs are much smaller, right? And there's more faculty expertise in your area, such that there's an opportunity to get much more of that immersion and exposure and experience. That's what I would say is, again, for the academic, I do think, again, probably the brand does somewhat more work than it probably does for the person who's oriented to practice. But I would balance that against, not uncommonly, what comes with the brand is you are one of 50 or 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 or 500. And what that means is that you're not getting the same kind of individualized attention that I've written a paper and now I want to get feedback on it, and there's just no way to get that feedback. So that would be the balance that I would say.
I agree with that. I just want to say one thing, though. The difference between, and this is not a question, but I still want to say, the difference between, doing an LLM or a PhD in India versus doing an SJD and a dissertation-based LLM in the US is, in India, I always see students who've completed this are, they are an encyclopedia of knowledge on that particular area. I mean, they know all kinds of random statutes and all kinds of things. So they're knowledge back. right? The difference in the US is they take one area and see what troubles them, and then raise questions and try to offer solutions, right? So it's the ability to raise questions, right? It's the ability to take a legal question and then present a coherent, coherent article, or present a coherent manner in which you think that question is an important question, it deserves an answer, and this is how you would answer it, and that makes a difference, and that puts you in a different place altogether in US academia, I think.
So we are going to wrap up, and there's food getting cold. Please run to the back of the room. There's really good food.
Before we do that, one thing is that in America, all meetings have to end with a selfie.
Okay.
So you all have to look
Sure.
and do a selfie.